There are moments in life that may seem like just a game, but the real terror begins when the truth is finally revealed. Tonight's story starts in the most ordinary way, but it ends with something so chilling you won't be able to sleep peacefully after hearing it. And remember, the real secret will only be revealed at the very end. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. For those who have been here before, welcome back to my channel. This is the place where creepypasta meets gaming. And today, I have a very special story for you guys. This story comes from a direct submission, and it is about a very well-known topic. I'm sure by now, we all know what Fortnite is. I had known about it for the longest time, but I'd never actually played it until my friends basically forced me to download it and play with them. They wanted to play in squads, which is what it's called when you play in groups of 4. My 4 friends were Evan, Xavier, and Braxton. Evan was hands down the best player and basically the initiator of this group match. Xavier was the second best. Then there was Braxton. Braxton only spoke on his headset when he was in trouble or needed help. Evan, Xavier, and I, on the other hand, just goofed around and talked the whole time. The two of them did their best to explain how to play to me over the headset. Anyway, none of this really matters. I'll skip ahead to the important part. Evan stopped talking, and there was a good 10 seconds of silence. Then Evan, it was leading us from one point to another, stopped dead in his tracks. His character just stood still for a while. Xavier turned on his headset, sounding annoyed, telling Evan to move. Still, just stood in place and haven't said nothing but according to the screen. Evan's mic was making noise, and I could hear background noise that seemed to be coming from Evan's mic. Xavier, Braxton, and I were all telling Evan to move or we ditch him. But we all dropped silent when a horrific, almost painfully loud screaming came from Evan's mic. It wasn't like he was screaming into the mic. It seemed like Evan was somewhere in the background of the room. Then a door slammed shut in the background, and the 3 of us were left not knowing what to say or do. I told the 2 of them I'd call Evan immediately and turned off the console. I tried calling him 5 times. He never picked up though, so I decided to drive over to his house, which was 2 minutes away. When I got to his house, and so on, no cars in the driveway. But the front door was open and the lights were on throughout the house. I let myself in, screaming Evan's name, and then screamed back from somewhere upstairs. I followed the sound of his voice right up to the loft bedroom, where I found him hiding under the bed. He told me to hide. I told him to get out from under the bed and tell me what happened. He said there was someone in his bedroom. He would speak in very limited sentences for the longest time until he calmed down and would finally explain. As Evan was playing Fortnite with us, he felt the tap under his bed. He pulled the cloth material that covered the sides of the bed up and looked under the bed, and saw a grown man hiding underneath that ass when he threw his headset on the bed and screamed as he backed into the corner. He says the man emerged from under the bed as Evan was still paralyzed in fear in the corner screaming. Then the man walked straight out the bedroom door, and that was the last we ever saw of him. At that moment, he didn't know if the man was still in the house or not, so he called the cops, not knowing what else to do. When they showed up, we didn't know what to expect from them. 2 cops actually showed up. The male officer went inside of the house and looked around, while the female officer stayed with us outside with a small pocket notebook in her hand, writing down what Evan described to her, and just like that, the cops left. I stayed over Evan's house that night just to make him feel better. We all still play Fortnite together. I'm much better now. Thank you for listening to this episode of My Inner Demons. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. But as always, I'll see you next time. Bye. All of us have experienced some degree of bullying in our lives, whether it be physical, mental, verbal, or otherwise. Bullying can have a tremendous impact on a victim, which is why many schools and communities are actively trying to prevent it. But despite these efforts, bullying still happens today. In fact, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine told me about a situation she experienced that left her traumatized. Like many other kids, my friend enjoyed playing a popular video game. She was particularly fond of the game's creative mode, where she could build structures with her friends. One day, she was building with her friends when a stranger joined their party. The man was unpleasant and told my friend that she was doing a terrible job. He said that he wanted to take over and that he was going to teach her how to build. My friend's initial reaction was to ignore him and continue what she was doing. However, the man began to use racial slurs and became threatening towards her. My friend was deeply hurt by what he said and felt helpless, since she was only 11 years old. Eventually, the man was removed from the party and my friend was left traumatized by the experience. This goes to show that even virtual spaces are not safe from bullying. And oftentimes, the victims of bullying are too afraid to speak up due to fear of retaliation. Unlike my friend, I've always been pretty good at video games. When I was in elementary school, I would play a popular online game with my classmates during recess. We would compete against each other to see who could defeat the most monsters in a certain amount of time. Since I was pretty good at the game, the other kids usually let me join their group so I could help them win. As I got older, I eventually stopped playing that game. However, last month I decided to hop back on just to see what it was like after all these years. When I logged in, I noticed that the game had changed quite a bit. There were less people playing and the graphics were outdated. Despite this, I played a few games to get a feel for it again. I knew the basics of the game, like where to go and what strategies to use, so I was able to rack up a few wins. After a couple of games, I wanted to try playing with other people. I didn't have any friends on the platform anymore, so I decided to play with random people. It was pretty fun to play with other people. We could strategize and work together to beat the monsters. One day I matched with a guy named Bob Rockets 16. We defeated a bunch of monsters and we ended up losing the game. My team was pretty upset about it, but I tried to cheer them up by telling them that we had done well. After the game ended, I received a private message from Bob Rockets 16. He told me that I was very good at the game and asked me if I wanted to play again. I told him that I would love to, but I didn't hear back from him. The next day, I was looking for teammates. I sent out a request, and within a couple of seconds, I got invited to a duo game. It was with Bob Rockets 16. I accepted the invitation, and we got into the game. This time, I could hear Bob Rockets 16 through the TV speakers. He was very enthusiastic and told me that he was excited to play with me again. At the start of the game, he told me to message him through the app so we could communicate better. I told him that I didn't have the app, but he insisted that I get it so we could play better together. I was hesitant at first, but I didn't want to ruin the game for him, so I got the app. Throughout the entire game, he kept telling me to put my mic on, but I told him that I didn't have one. Because of this, he seemed to get more frustrated. We didn't do very well in the game, and we ended up coming in 20th place. He told me that I needed to get a mic so we could communicate better. I told him again that I didn't have one, but he didn't seem to care. He kept insisting that I get one so we could play again. After the game ended, I got a message from him. He told me to put my mic on next time. I told him that I didn't have one, but he didn't respond. I was confused by his behavior, but I just shrugged it off. I thought that he was just a douchebag, but the story doesn't end there. I'll continue in part 2. See you then. My 10-year-old son Chris had been playing that Fortnite game all day. Every day for the past few months, and it had been driving me insane. I would scream at him to go out once in a while. Instead, all I heard was that sound of that bus honking. Its horn every 10 minutes, constant gunshots coming from his room. Eventually, one night at like 9 o'clock p.m., Chris came out of his room and shouted out to the kitchen that he was having someone over. I really asked him who. He said some guy from Fortnite who lives around here. A fuse went off in my head, As heard this, apparently he invited over some random person he was talking to on Fortnite. When I asked him how old, Chris shrugged his shoulders and said, "I don't know, he sounds kind of old." I started to freak out, knowing some random stranger who was probably well older than my 10-year-old son was coming to my house. I locked all the doors and turned on all the porch lights. I told Chris to just keep playing his game in his room and not to talk to anyone else. I waited around by the windows until a car pulled up in front of my house. It stopped and the headlights turned off. The door opened. Someone came out and started walking up the pathway to my front door. I felt like my heart dropped into my stomach when I saw some middle-aged man, probably 40, mildly overweight, step into the light and then up the stairs to the front door. He rang the bell 3 times. I ignored it. Then he started pounding on the door for a bit. I ignored that as well. He walked down the stoop, looking up through the windows as he walked down the pathway. I made sure he couldn't see me. I thought for sure he'd go to his car and leave. But he went around to the side of my house, out of sight from the windows. He was actually going to my back door. I heard from around back the door being nudged because he clearly tried to open it. I stayed put where I was. There were no other entry points to the house, so once he gave up, he would surely leave. When the noises from the back door stopped, I waited for 5 minutes in the kitchen until I thought it was time to check. I wanted to hopefully get a look outside, so I shut the lights and lifted the blinds in the kitchen. There was the man's face 2 inches from the glass as he looked into the kitchen, or rather, he now looked at me. I screamed with a shake in my yell that I was calling the cops. I think that scared him off because he walked away, and I watched as he got in his car and left. I didn't call the cops though. Instead, I marched right to Chris's room and scolded him. I grounded him for 2 weeks for endangering not only the household, but himself. That men know video games for 2 weeks, and after the 2 weeks, you would have to go 2 months without access to his wireless headset. Now that the 2 weeks are up, he's back on the game. I get sick to my stomach thinking about what would have happened if I wasn't home. You